السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the book of al-Murbi for the Sharh of Zad al-Mustaqni, and we stopped at or we're starting Bab al-Istinja, Bab al-Istinja, the chapter of al-Istinja, al-Istinja. This is how to be pronounced, and when we get to know the linguistics and what it means in the terminology of that word, it's basically about purifying and cleaning oneself after relieving oneself, basically after urinating and defecating. And the etiquettes that is to be observed for going to the bathroom and responding to the call, as they say, when a person would have this. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. And human beings, they oftentimes they don't reflect upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way that Allah created them. And He's the most wise subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He created them in such a way that every detail of it is about establishing the ubudiyyah, the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even in the fact that we, as human beings, we eat and drink and so on, and then we have to relieve ourselves, we have to go to the bathroom, and there is impurities that comes out from our bodies that no decent human being with a normal fitrah would say that this is an enjoyable thing, or someone, or al-'adhu billah, would consider these things that comes out of his body as something pure, as something pleasant. So this is a universal thing. And all of that is meant, whether it's in matters of aqidah, in matters of belief, in matters of ibadah, for human beings to humble themselves. They're not all of that as they think they are. They need to humble themselves to their Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to worship Him alone subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to fulfill these rulings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, of how to clean yourself. And that's one of the beauties of the deen of Islam, that we are taught everything, as it's mentioned in some of the athar from the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, even when it comes to relieving ourselves and going to the bathroom. So we'll get to it inshallah ta'ala from a fiqh perspective. So this is the chapter of al-istinja and some of the adab and the etiquettes to be observed. So first of all, I would like to read what's in Zad al-Mustaqni, and this is what we have in the version that we have in front of us, which is written in red. So before we get to the sharh, so he says باب الاستنجاء, and he says يستحب عند دخول الخلاء قول بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث. So here, this first part of the chapter, he's going to talk about what's yustahab, what's recommended, and mentioning, depends on how you want to look at it, 8 to 12 points here of what's recommended when a person enters the bathroom. So let's read inshallah ta'ala what's mentioned here in the sharh. So he says باب الاستنجاء, the chapter of al-istinja. He says من نجوت الشجرة أي قطعتها. So he's describing the linguistics, the meaning of al-istinja. And by now we should know that when you see the alif lam alif and then the sin and then the ta on the wazn, on the pattern of al-istif'al, that means you're seeking something, right? Al-istinshaq, that means you're getting the water into the nose, and then al-istinthar is to get the water out. Al-istijmar, as we will say it. So that means you're seeking something. So where does it come from? It comes from najawtu ash-shajara. Najawtu, a person would say najawtu ash-shajara, الشجرة is the tree. And najawtu here, this is the past tense of that word, which means أي قطعتها. That means I cut the tree. So najawtu الشجرة, that means I cut the tree. So فكأنه قطع الأذى. So as if he cut off or severed or cut off the adha, which is the harm. So this is one of the meanings of al-istinja, is to cut off the impurities, to remove it. That's basically what najawtu means. And this is one of the meanings of it. And there are other meanings, but this is the one that he mentioned here, because also it comes from a najwa with a ta' marbuta, not a najwa, which is mentioned in Surah al-Mujadala, which is secret counsel. No, a najwa, which is with a ta' marbuta at the end, is anything that is not flat on the earth, but rather is elevated a little bit from the earth. And that's whenever they would relieve themselves in the openness, they would find a higher place so that they hide behind it, not an open place where people can see them. Also, there's the word an-najwa, which is as it's mentioned here, and also the layer of things, the outside layer of something when you peel something. So it all comes into these meanings of removing or a higher place where a person hide behind it. So this is, we got to know linguistically what al-istinja. So al-istinja, that means you're seeking this act of removing the impurity that comes out from the body. Wal-istinja, now this is the definition of it religiously, or in the terminology of fiqh. إزالة خارج من سبيل بماء. إزالة, this is the same as قطع, to remove. إزالة خارج. Al-kharij, this is a noun, what already came out, what comes out. Min sabil. As-sabil is path. And the words that are used are decent words, of course. And they use these types of words that doesn't explicitly describe things. So as-sabil here, in this context, is the front or the back of a person where the najasa comes from. Right? We have two sabil, basically. We have two paths where impurities come from. So, and this is the norm, because this is what they refer to as sabil. And that is because there is other ways. For example, if a person he has a condition where the impurities, urine or the feces, comes out from a different path, from one's stomach directly out, or they make an opening different than these openings because he has a medical condition. Does that to be considered sabil? Right? No. And that's why if a person, for example, the impurities comes, I forgot the medical terminology for it, but you understand what I'm saying? So if a person, they get the feces out from a tube from one's colon directly to be outside, does that part of the skin, if there is a part of the skin, do we call it istinja if it's cleaned? No, it's not. So what should be done if it's something that is there's nothing on the person can make salah, of course, but that comes into the category of removing impurities, not istinja as we know it. That's why it has to be from the normal sabil, in the normal condition. So izalatu kharijin min sabilin bima', to remove what comes out from the normal passage of urine and feces with water. This is to remove it with water, or izalatu hukmihi, or to remove, like the same word izala is mentioned, hukmihi, the hukm meaning its rulings, and hukmihi, the ha here refers to the ruling of is the kharij, which is the impurity here that comes out, to remove the ruling of it bihajarin aw nahwi, with a stone or the like of it. And as we know that the ulama are very precise. So the first one with the water, to remove the najasa with water, and that's a very obvious thing. If there's no water, and a person would use a stone, أو نحوه, or the like of the stone, tissue, paper, whatever people use, you're removing the hukm. You're removing the ruling of the najasa for you to be able to make salah and wudu and so on. Because when it's removed with a stone or a tissue, you're not for sure 100% that all of the najasa is removed, especially that if it's not solid. So you're just basically acting upon what seems to be, or what it shows to be, to the best of your ability, there's no najasa. You're only sure if there's water. So does it mean that if there's no water, a person is not able to clean himself? No, you don't have to use water, even if water is present, as we would talk about it, inshallah ta'ala, even though it's recommended to use water if water is there. But if a person does not choose to use the water when it's there, it's still valid, and a person will be pure, will be clean, and a person can make salah and wudu and so on. So that's why they say izalatu hukmihi. And with the tahara, with the purification, we are commanded to be at ease, not to make it difficult for oneself, or for a person to have waswas, and for a person to, did I clean myself? Did I not clean myself? And I'm spending more time in these things because sometimes when you're when you're studying the matter word by word here, it causes people to think that the matter is a very difficult one. No, it's the opposite. And that's why, as these types of words makes the matter very easy and simple. So the goal here is not that you remove the najasa in a very precise, under the microscope type of a level of removing it. No, that's not the goal. The goal is to the best of one's ability, there's no impurities, because it's in a place where you can't see, and you're not commanded to examine this. If there's water, as is going to be mentioned, how to sense that, which is a very obvious thing for everyone, and with a stone or the like of it, by no najasa comes out as a result of wiping with a stone or a tissue or so. So that's, you're removing the hukm of the najasa, or what comes out, and the salah becomes valid. And even if the water comes later or it's present, it doesn't matter. The salah is valid, and a person does not have to clean himself again. So this is what al-istinja. So what's the definition of al-istinja? Is to remove what comes out from the sabil, from the normal passage with water, or to remove the hukm of it with a stone. ويسمى الثاني, and الثاني, which is removing its ruling, the ruling of the najasa with a stone or a tissue or so, it's called what? Istijmaran. Istijmaran, istinja, istijmar. Al-istijmar is to seek the cleanliness with the jimar. Min al-jimar. And what is al-jimar? Al-hijaratu as-saghira, the small stones. So they will call it istijmar. So you have here two words, al-istinja and al-istijmar. If one is mentioned, the other one is included. So if the word al-istinja only is mentioned, that includes using water or using stones. If the word al-istijmar is used alone, it can also refer to both. But if they're both used in the same context, then one is with water and one with stones. Clear? So this is, we get to know what al-istinja means linguistically and definition of it, and the al-istijmar, what it means also linguistically, and that it's part of what al-istinja is. Then he says, yustahabbu, and you can number things here to see how many things are recommended here. The first one, he says, yustahabbu inda dukhul al-khala. It's recommended عند دخول الخلاء. One thing I want you to also to take a note of that is, in the books of fiqh, sometimes they say yustahab, sometimes they say it's masnoon. Masnoon from the sunnah. It's, if it says from the sunnah, that means there's a clear evidence about it. Authentic evidence, hadith, before that ayah of the Quran. But yustahab is more general. Yustahab, recommended, is more general than masnoon. So it's still recommended. That means if a person does it, he get rewards. If he doesn't do it, there's no harm upon the person, no sin. But it might be something that comes under the general categories of things in the Sharia. A general hadith, a general verse that, like for example, using the right first. You don't have to have a specific hadith about using the right first in every matter, because we have general statements as it's going to be mentioned. So it's always, you say, it's always yustahab. It's always recommended to use your right hand to walk into the right foot in any matter that is pure and good. And it's always recommended to use the left in something that is not clean and things like this. So, but again, this is not always if you say yustahabba, that means there's no evidence. No, but I'm just saying the difference is if they're both in the same context between yustahabba and what's masnoon. So he says here yustahabbu عند دخول الخلاء. It's recommended عند, and عند is right there. It's or very close. That's word عند is. دخول الخلاء, in entering الخلاء. Now we have another word which is الخلاء. And al-khala' wa nahwi, and the like of al-khala'. Al-khala' is a word that is used for the place that is prepared or made for people to relieve themselves, which is basically the bathrooms, for example. Or in the desert, if a person is in the openness, it doesn't have to be desert, it can be a jungle, but it's in the openness, then in that spot that a person is about to sit and relieve himself. So it comes or given the same ruling, but then it's the spot that a person choose. So it's recommended for him once he start, when he sits and he takes, lift his garment up, for example, then what is recommended is to be observed at that moment when he is about to sit down. But in the places where it's already built, then before entering the place, right when a person is entering. Not 2 miles away. Just once a person is entering, this is what is yustahabbu here عند دخول الخلاء ونحوه, and the like of الخلاء, whether like for example in the openness. وهو بالمد, وهو meaning الخلاء بالمد. You see الخلاء, not الخلاء, الخلاء بالمد. What is it? الموضع المعد لقضاء الحاجة. الموضع, the place that is prepared, المعد لقضاء الحاجة. This is the word that they use also for urinating and defecating. Instead of saying it like this explicitly, instead we say قضاء الحاجة. Al-haja is the need. Qada is to fulfill. So fulfilling one's need. And that's sufficient for a person to understand what it means. لقضاء الحاجة. So we want to establish these terminologies so that we don't have to all the time translating it. Right? So we need to remember al-istinja. Right? We need to remember al-istijmar. We need to remember the al-khala'. We need to remember qada' al-haja. Right? Qada' al-haja. So he says يستحب عند دخول الخلاء قول بسم الله. It's recommended when a person is entering al-khala' to say قول. قول here is a noun, not a verb. Right? قول بسم الله, to say بسم الله in the name of Allah. He says here the evidence for it لحديث علي رضي الله عنه ستر ما بين الجن وعورات بني آدم إذا دخل الكنيف أن يقول بسم الله. يقول رواه ابن ماجه والترمذي وقال ليس إسناده بالقوي. So the hadith of Ali رضي الله عنه that he said ستر, الستر is the concealment or covering, ما بين الجن, what conceals and what covers between the jinn and the awrat. The awrat is the plural of awra, which is the private parts that has to be covered, and the private parts of the sons of Adam. إذا دخل الكنيف, when a person enters al-kanif. And al-kanif is one of the words also that is used for the bathroom, or for the place where a person relieve oneself. إذا دخل الكنيف, أن يقول, that a person would say Bismillah, to say Bismillah, for a person to say Bismillah. And this hadith, as he says, رواه ابن ماجه والترمذي وقال ليس إسناده بالقوي. And as you see here, the takhrij of the hadith, he says that the isnad of it is not strong. So the hadith has shawahid, has other narrations that give it strength. And this is something that the ulama are all upon, and the amal and the actions has been upon this, is to say Bismillah. So, and this is one of the things, is that you might find the hadith, the specific hadith that is mentioned is weak, and can a person says we should not build an action on the weak hadith. This is in general, yes, but when something that the actions has been upon this, and there are many narrations that supports this, then whether the hadith is weak or not, it does not affect the rulings. Plus, in Madhab Imam Ahmad, which is one of the things unique about the Madhab, that Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, in his Madhab, he would give precedence to the weak hadith if it's not challenged by any other text or opinions or so. So that comes before al-qiyas, even before analogy, if there's a hadith that is weak. But the weakness of the hadith is not in the level of a fabricated one or very weak. So it's in the level of al-hasan, something that is close to be sound. And this is what also very clear in the madhab. They would give more importance to that. So this particular narration is not a strong narration. But again, as we said, this is all of the ulama are upon this because of the many narrations. To say Bismillah when a person is entering al-khala, and this is before anything that a person do. And also qawlu Bismillah, and then a'udhu billahi min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. And to say I seek refuge in Allah from al-khubth wal-khaba'ith. And al-khubth, he says bi-iskan al-ba' with a sukoon on the ba'. There are two ways. The first one he says bi-iskan al-ba' al-khubth with the ba' has a sukoon, and the tha here is with the tongue outside. Min al-khubthi. He says قال القاضي عياض رحمه الله in the meaning of this khubth, which is with the sukoon. He says هو أكثر روايات الشيوخ. Most of the shuyukh, and he's from the tabi'in, so those who before him and the people of knowledge, most of the narrations they say it with the sukoon on the ba', and that's what's more authentic, is to say Allahumma a'udhu billahi min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. وفسره بالشر, and he described it by الشر. The tafsir of it is evil in general, and that includes every evil and includes the shayateen also and everything. But here wal-khaba'ith, and al-khaba'ith, he says ash-shayateen, the devils. So al-khubth is all evil, and al-khaba'ith is the devils. فكأنه استعاذ من الشر وأهله, as if he استعاذ, sought refuge in Allah from all of the evil and the people of evil. So this is the meaning of Allahumma a'udhu billahi min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. General and then specific. Or evil and the people of evil. So this is with the ba' has a sukoon in it. He says قال الخطابي وقال الخطابي رحمه الله هو بضم الباء. The other opinion, which is less people, they give it the dhamma, which is al-khubuth. أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث. Some said with the dhamma on the ba', وهو جمع خبيث, which is the jam' of khabith, which is wicked, evil. والخبائث جمع خبيثة, and al-khaba'ith is the plural of khabitha, one. So khabith and khabitha, what does that sound to you? With the very basics of knowing masculine and feminine, one is masculine and one is feminine. So فكأنه استعاذ من ذكرانهم وإناثهم. So with the الخبث والخبائث comes from khabith and khabitha, as if he then, with the meaning of it, that he's seeking refuge in Allah from the ذكرانهم, from their males, and وإناثهم, and their females, the males and females of the jinn. And this is the not the best or not the most preferred opinion, but the one that is most preferred is with the sukoon. Allahumma a'udhu billahi min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. He says واقتصر المصنف على ذلك تبعا للمحرر والفروع وغيرهما. And المصنف is the author. Comes from التصنيف. التصنيف is compiling things, writing. So he says here, referring to Imam al-Hajjawi, the author of Zad al-Mustaqni, who's saying واقتصر المصنف, Imam al-Buhuti, the owner of al-Rawd al-Murbi. He said that al-Musannif اقتصر, that means he only mentioned that, and not more hadith, not more dhikr to be said. Only Bismillah, أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث. تبعا للمحرر تبعا للمحرر following what's in the book المحرر and والفروع وغيرهما the books from the مذهب الإمام أحمد لحديث أنس رضي الله عنه because of the hadith of أنس رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام كان whenever إذا دخل الخلاء when he entered الخلاء قال he would say اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الخبث والخبائث متفق عليه الحديث is متفق عليه اللهم إني so you say بسم الله اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الخبث والخبائث وزاد في الإقناع والمنتهى these are names of books and if we have time inshallah ta'ala we can talk about these books with their authors and الإقناع زاد المستقنع is basically a summarized version of الإقناع والمنتهى is more detailed than from the books of the madhab of Imam Ahmad رحمه الله وزاد في الإقناع والمنتهى تبعا للمقنع المقنع which is where the said المقنع comes from وغيره and other than that الرجسي النجسي الشيطان الرجيم so some narrations they would add this to it اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الخبث والخبائث الرجس النجس الشيطان الرجيم الرجس النجس which is all from the meaning both means the impure one and الرجس and النجس are the same thing basically with regards to what's impure and some had mentioned that this is not present in these books but anyway so it comes in and the hadith is not authentic in this matter but he says here الرجس النجس the impure الشيطان الرجيم لحديث أبي أمامة because of the hadith of أبي أمامة لا يعجز أحدكم إذا دخل مرفقه none of you should have the inability when he enters مرفقه the place where he relieve himself أن يقول اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الرجس النجس الشيطان الرجيم and the hadith is weak and if a person wants to say it when it comes to these hadith that has weaknesses in it there's no harm inshallah if a person says it but not to believe that this is necessarily something that the Prophet ﷺ said and what's mentioned above is sufficient inshallah ta'ala so this is this first mas'ala and then he says here وعند الخروج منه غفرانك so in زاد المستقنع وعند الخروج منه غفرانك and he says in the road يستحب أن يقول then it's still that means it's recommended عند الخروج منه while الخروج while coming out from it from الخلاء so عند الدخول while going in عند الخروج while going out أي من الخلاء ونحوه from the خلاء ونحوه the openness and things like this so in the openness when a person is done so when he's getting up right to say or if it's a building when coming out to say غفرانك to say غفرانك غفرانك meaning oh Allah I seek forgiveness from you أي أسألك غفرانك that means I ask you for your forgiveness من الغفر he mentioned here linguistically where the غفران comes from الغفر with a سكون on the فاء وهو الستر which is concealing covering لحديث أنس كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا خرج من الخلاء قال غفرانك رواه الترمذي وحسنه he said that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام whenever he would come out from the خلاء he would say غفرانك one word very easy to remember غفرانك and don't say اللهم اغفر لي just say غفرانك that's what he would say and it's much more stronger you know in the noun that it's much more stable than the action and the ulama they mentioned many things with regards to the why asking for forgiveness in that situation whether it's because he did not make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while he was relieving himself or asking Allah for forgiveness because the inability of being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he made it in such an ease for a person to remove these toxins from the body This is all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're being grateful to Allah. And when a person humble himself by saying that I'm not able to fulfill really the perfect gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some even mentioned that when you know how it feels when a person wants to go to the bathroom, and then what happens after a person is done? You were heavy, you felt the heaviness of it, and then that heaviness is removed. So even some said it reminds the person of what these heaviness in the heart of sins, and when a person is the sins are removed from a person, the relief that a person would get as a result of being removed from one's sins. So that everything that reminds us of other things. So physically, when we do things, it reminds us of the non-physical matters, and this is the way that a person develops in himself, following the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. عليه الصلاة والسلام. Then he says, وَسُنَّ لَهُ أَيْضًا أَنْ يَقول. Sunnah here says وَسُنَّ with a shadda on the noon. That means it's from the Sunnah, it's recommended. And it doesn't have to, again, because I said this earlier, it doesn't have to be that he said was sunnah here, that this specific one has an evidence and yustahabbu does not have an evidence. No. It can be used interchangeably, no problem. So, وَسُنَّ له, it's recommended for him, أيضا also, أن يقول, that he say, الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. Alhamdulillah, perfect praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, الذي أذهب, the one that أذهب, moved away from me, عني الأذى, the harm, وعافاني, and gave me معافاة, he gave me strength. Otherwise, imagine that did not happen, that a person is able to relieve himself. Its life cannot continue that way. So being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Alhamdulillah الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. He says, لما رواه ابن ماجه عن أنس رضي الله عنه كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا خرج من الخلاء قال الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. So that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام would say that. And the hadith, whether it's, as some said, it's da'if or weak, and it's mawquf, but even if it's a mawquf hadith, that means from the Sahabi, which is authentic, it's sufficient for the Muslim to follow and to act upon it. So if we go back up again to make sure that we get what we're going to memorize from the read statements from Zad al-Mustaqni, and you can look up that in Zad al-Mustaqni only, or you write it down, so that you choose whatever is easier for you to memorize, inshallah. So he says, باب الاستنجاء يستحب عند دخول الخلاء قول بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث وعند الخروج منه غفرانك وعند الخروج منه غفرانك الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. So that's what basically is mentioned in the book with the explanation. The next مسألة here, he says تقديم رجله اليسرى دخولا ويمنى خروجا عكس مسجد. So whether the previous one you want to make it as two things or one thing, because it's going and leaving, right? And here this is whether you make it two or one. So now we can either have, this is the third point or the second point. So it doesn't matter. So here that means ويستحب. So it's also recommended له تقديم رجله اليسرى. تقديم is to put forward. يا الذين آمنوا لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. So تقديم, to put forward رجله اليسرى, his left leg. Right? When a person walks, you walk with your foot and your leg. That means to put forward the left foot or leg دخولا, while entering. أي عند دخول الخلاء, meaning that when you enter the khala, whether it's a building ونحوه, again the like of it. من مواضع الأذى. Now he added من مواضع الأذى, all the places of أذى, all the places of impurities and things like this. If you enter anything that is a place of impurity, you enter with the left foot. He says here, and how that can be perceived if a person is in the openness, what's left, and is basically before you sit down, right? The last step that you take before you sit down is that you put forward the left one. أي عند دخول الخلاء ونحوه من مواضع الأذى. ويمنى خروجا. That means and also يستحب له, it's recommended for him تقديمه, as تقديم here is mentioned before, to put forward يمنى. يمنى is the opposite of يسرى, the right. يمنى رجليه, the right of his the right leg. خروجا, while entering or going out. I'm sorry, going out from the خلاء. عكس مسجد, opposite to the masjid. When you enter the masjid, you enter with your right foot and you leave with your left foot. Even though when you're leaving, you're not leaving to a najasa, but the masjid is the best spot on the face of earth. So when you leave it, you're leaving the best spot on the face of earth, you leave with the left. And that by itself also how the effect in the heart, right? You're leaving what you need to be in, but you have to leave. What can we do? You have to leave the masjid so that you fulfill the other rights in your life. But this is your original place. This is where you were always attached to. Opposite to the khala. The khala is a place where you want to run away from. You don't want to stay there for a long time. So that's why when you enter, it reminds you, when you're entering with the left foot, this is not the place to enjoy and to sit and to check your phone and things like this, which is all not permissible. Right? It's the place where you need to do it as fast as you can and then you leave. ويمنى خروجا عكس مسجد ومنزل, he added the manzil too. So there's now in general, you don't have to have a specific evidence for the masjid and for the house and things like this, just to make it as a habit. ونعل ولبس نعل, and when you wear نعل, shoes, وخف, the different types of shoes and sandals, right? So the same thing, to put first the right, and there's evidences in this as he mentioned the hadith, and when you're taking them off, take the left first. فاليسرى تقدم للأذى واليمنى لما سواه. So al-yusra is to be put forward to the harmful things, or أذى, not harmful, but impurities, unpleasant things like that. واليمنى لما سواه, and the right foot to the rest. وروى الطبراني, he says, في المعجم الصغير عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال, he says here that Abu Hurairah, he said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, إذا انتعل أحدكم فليبدأ باليمنى وإذا خلع فليبدأ باليسرى. So here, this is hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, and even though it's in Bukhari and Muslim, it's he said at-Tabarani, but again, usually when the hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, they would say al-Bukhari and Muslim. So it's okay. No one is, things can happen like that. So anyway, so this is an authentic hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, إذا انتعل. Inta'al is the act of putting the na'l on. Inta'al. Putting the na'l, which is the shoes, on. And the shoes doesn't have to be shoes. Can be slippers, can be sandals, anything that a person put on his foot. أحدكم, if one of you put his shoes on or khuf or anything, فليبدأ باليمنى, so let him start with the right. وإذا خلع. خلع is to take it out. Like al-khul' versus talaq. Al-khul' is to break the contract. Al-khala'a, that means you remove something. خلعت ثيابي, I took off my clothes, right? وإذا خلع فليبدأ باليسرى. Then let him start with the foot, with the left foot. And this is what we teach even our children from early ages, as this is the etiquettes that we observe. وعلى قياسه وعلى قياسه, and upon the analogy from al-qiyas, if it's mentioned about al-na'l, the same thing applies for al-qamisu wa nahwu. Al-qamis, shirt, garment, and so on. Always, when you're putting things on, put the right arm first. When you're taking off a shirt, take the left one first. And this is till it becomes, you become at ease with it. When a person gets used to something, it becomes the ease. The same thing when you sleep. You start your sleep on the right side. If you're not used to this, in the first day, week, whatever there is, you might find, you have to remind yourself. After this, it becomes the ease. This will become the norm. You would feel so much uncomfortable if you do it otherwise. So it's something that we have to do so that we become always doing the right first and then the left. Then he says, so this is with regards to entering and leaving, entering with the right and leaving, entering with the left and leaving with the right, opposite to the masjid and the house and the like of this. One last mas'ala, inshallah ta'ala, so that we don't keep you for a long time. He says, وَاعْتِمَادُهُ عَلَى رِجْلِهِ الْيُسْرَى. Also يستحب. It's recommended for him, اعتماده. اعتماده, him relying upon, or when you lean on something, this is al-i'timad. And it's like when they define التوكل على الله, relying upon Allah, they say اعتماد القلب, when the heart leans on, relying upon. So physically, when you اعتماد الاعتماد على رجله اليسرى, on his left leg or foot. This is when a person is sitting on the ground. When a person is sitting on the ground, to relieve oneself is to lean onto the left. حال جلوسه, while he's sitting, لقضاء الحاجة. When you sit on the ground, either you have balanced way of sitting on both sides, or to the right or to the left. So he says here, it's recommended to lean more towards the left. حال جلوسي لقضاء الحاجة لما روى الطبراني في المعجم والبيهقي عن سراقة بن مالك. That he mentioned here an evidence from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, from Suraqa ibn Malik. He said, أمرنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن نتكئ على اليسرى وأن ننصب اليمنى. That the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam ordered us, أن نتكئ is like نعتمد. الاتكاء also is when you recline on something. على اليسرى, on the left. وأن ننصب اليمنى. ننصب is when erecting something. So al-yumna is more erected, not because you're not leaning on it. So when you lean on the left, the right is at ease, you're not leaning on it. So it's kind of standing. وأن ننصب اليمنى. And as you see here, this hadith is weak. This hadith is weak. And as we said, that from the usul, from the principles of Imam Ahmad, is to act upon the weak hadith, especially if there's nothing to oppose this. There's nothing, no nusus that says otherwise. Plus, there is, even the four imams are upon that opinion, that it's recommended. And no one said otherwise. No one said that it's not recommended, it's not something good. So the amal, the action is been upon it. And that's one of the ways also to know the rulings. That this is how they were acting upon this. That means it has basis to it. So اعتماد على رجله اليسرى. We should stop here, inshallah ta'ala, and we can continue next time. So going again up to make sure that we read again the nas from Zad al-Mustaqni that we need to memorize, inshallah. So he says here, just follow it again. باب الاستنجاء. باب الاستنجاء. يستحب عند دخول الخلاء قول بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث الحمد لله وعند الخروج منه غفرانك. وعند الخروج منه غفرانك الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. وتقديم رجله اليسرى دخولا. وتقديم رجله اليسرى دخولا ويمنى خروجا. ويمنى خروجا عكس مسجد. عكس مسجد. ونعل عكس مسجد ونعل. واعتماده على رجليه اليسرى. all of that و that means يستحب. واعتماده على رجليه اليسرى. So this is where we stopped, inshallah ta'ala. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. And as we said, the goal here is that we understand what every word means. MashaAllah, if we get to know more evidences, and this is what we're upon the evidences, of course, but we want to establish also the proper way of learning and to memorize, inshallah ta'ala, the Zad al-Mustaqni by the will of Allah. And be patient, inshallah. We're still with the exams, inshallah. It's going to be very soon, inshallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, inshallah. Just study, inshallah. طيب, the attendance code is istinja. Istinja is the attendance code. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.